Welcome back to a news show that's more trusted than CNN, ABC, 123, Fox News, MSNBC, LMNOP. News! This video is sponsored by Picking Your Nose, for when no tissues are around and you just gotta get a big one out of there. Hey audience, you picked a winner. It's funny because he picked his nose. Ah! So in news in America, Donald Trump is still really pissed off about Michael Wolff's new book, Fire and Fury, which basically confirms all we've figured, since his presidency began, which is he's kind of dumb. Basically, Michael Wolff, over the span of a time, basically sat around the White House and chatted with some people about the experiences in the White House and brought this book out, and it's really super negative, and Trump doesn't like that. So Trump hit back and put all of our fears to rest by stating how just super duper uber pooper smart he is, and that he is totally smart. That's reassuring, it's like getting a doctor's note that says you have syphilis, and then, your girlfriend reads and she says, "How do you have syphilis?" And you look her right in the eye and say, "But I don't have syphilis." Donald Trump has done a really great job trying to make certain Americans and certain people not believe mainstream news and not believe, the establishment. It is good to take into consideration that perhaps there is some spin or some bias that's happening in your news reporting. However, even then, I still believe mainstream media, half the time. The other half the time, I'm kind of it's probably not the entire story. The issue with Donald Trump is that I'm now at a point where I don't believe fucking anything he says. So if I want an insight, about how his presidency's going and stuff like that, I am going to look to people like Michael Wolff, who, have sat around and seen what the inner workings of the White House are like. And that's why I think his book is so frickin' damaging to Donald Trump. But Donald Trump is also, immune to any kind of criticism. He just keeps on trucking, keeps on making America great again. And nothing really seems to stop him from the Trump train. Doot doot! So I'm sure he'll continue to be our president. Well, not my president. Your president. Speaking of my version of your president, let's talk about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Pretty boy JT has been traveling around Canada right now, doing very normal political town halls type stuff. And yesterday, he was at one where a lady asked him this.
I was just curious how you feel about being the first prime minister ever found guilty of a federal crime.
As you can see, we thoroughly vetted the questions before showing up tonight.
Now, his response is basically, "Isn't it great we have an ethics commission?" That doesn't really relate to rest any of the accusations that you've been getting, but at the same time, Justin Trudeau is also absolutely not guilty of a crime. It's not a crime to go on vacation with someone who's a lobbyist. It's just not a very good look. To be fair, all you have to do is look at those deep, dark eyes and those lovely eyebrows and that nose of his, and all is forgiven. Swoon! Another piece of Canadian news for all my lovely American viewers is that Tim Hortons, our big coffee chain here in Canada, looks really fucking awful right now. Recently in Ontario, Premier Kathleen Wynne has been upping the minimum wage with a goal of by 2020 getting up to $15 an hour. So just this past year, at the beginning of the year, the minimum wage was raised up to $14 an hour. Because of this raise, Tim Hortons, which has always paid minimum wage, but has actually these kind of great benefit plans that go along with it, and that's why a lot of people work there, has been cutting back on those benefits in retribution to that $14 minimum wage raise. Now saying that, the Tim Hortons HQ is saying that these are just basically the rogue people that own the businesses, and Tim Hortons themselves have nothing to do with it, but it still looks really shitty on you guys, so you guys should probably step in here and stop them from doing shit like that. Basically what I'm trying to go for is you shouldn't punish your employees for something that's out of their control, and something that pretty much every young person in existence is for. Yeah, can we make a little bit more money, please? Shit's expensive out here right now. Hey fans, the apocalypse is gonna happen this year. Well, maybe not this year, because at least North and South Korea have opened up negotiating again between each other. So that's positive. The last time they've had talks was over 2 years ago, and people are speculating that this is directly because of how frickin' volatile Donald Trump is. So we'll see if it leads anywhere. Chances are it won't, but maybe that means that like North and South Korea will kind of like bro fist and be okay while America's still kind of fucked. I don't know. Let's just see how this goes. It'll be interesting to see too when South Korea hosts the Olympics later this year, what North Korea is going to do. I hear that they're going to participate in all that kind of fun stuff. A lot of people are looking down on that because they say, you know, this rogue nation shouldn't be recognized as a nation and shit like that. But at the same time, if the Olympics are like able to put the nuclear doomsday time back by like a year, I'm for it. Man, them North Koreans, crazy. I want to chat about two more things that are a little bit more serious. I'm going to be putting on a bit more of a serious face. Serious. I want to talk about Senator Lynn Beyak. Who is this person right here? Who is she? She's a senator in Ontario. Why is she in the news? For some very interesting views of hers that she's been expressing very openly. A few months back in like March or so, Miss Beyak began publishing some open letters that were openly critical of how Canadians and the Canadian government is treating residential schools. For those who don't know, residential schools were a really nasty part of Canadian history where basically the government took Aboriginal children from their families, put them in these schools and basically tried to get rid of all their culture and just get them to assimilate with the Canadian culture and the Western culture that was enveloping Canada at the time. Now, I've learned about residential schools when I myself was in school. Around middle school, sometime between like 7 and 8, I had a teacher who was part Aboriginal, so he made sure that we did a topic on Aboriginal schools. And to sum it up, that shit was fucked. Those kids were beaten, some of them died, it was basically a cultural genocide. They had all of their heritage wiped away from them, and if they protested, there would be absolutely brutal retribution faced upon them. To basically sum it up, residential schools were really, really bad. So, why is Senator Beyak openly saying that maybe they're not so bad as we thought they were? Her entire idea is that there were lots of people who worked at these residential schools that had good intentions. You know, they were people that weren't racist and didn't beat kids. And while that's somewhat true probably and very comforting for us white people to talk about, it is actually a very nasty part of our history. However, if you openly ignore this part of history, or say that perhaps it wasn't as bad as we express it today, then of course, as I'm sure the saying goes, we are doomed to repeat it. Everyone should know that residential schools were bad and are rather indefensible. Now, very fortunately for us, and very unfortunately for her, she was a progressive conservative. And the new leader, Mr. Andrew Scheer, has actually removed her from his caucus so that now she is technically an independent. For anyone who doesn't know who he is, Andrew Scheer is the progressive conservative leader, and he is basically vanilla ice cream. And while I myself am not a conservative, I will give credit to Andrew Scheer for removing this openly racist woman from his caucus. That was the right thing to do, and many people now will be more open to conservatives now that they know that these damaging individuals are not representative of the party itself. The last thing I want to talk about today is a massive issue that is going on in the UK right now. A young man has recently pled guilty to a number of charges that were filed against him when him and another individual went around on motorcycles and basically threw acid at 6 different people over a period of an hour and a half. Now, acid attacks have become a massive, massive issue across the United Kingdom, with more and more of these stories coming out day to day, and that is because of how easy it is to create the corrosive acid needed for these kinds of attacks. A few simple ingredients you can get from like a supply store, and then bam, you have a weapon. So these two rode around on motorcycles and threw acid at people who were on motorcycles themselves who'd happen to have an open visor or weren't wearing a helmet. And of course tried to steal things from them as well. It is absolutely horrifying to see the damage that these two individuals have done to all of these completely innocent people. Now, the issue with the man who just pled guilty is that he is very young. He's only 17. So, right now, the court is deciding whether or not to try to give him a lighter sentence because of his age, or whether or not to throw the book at him. I think it would be very wise for the United Kingdom to throw the book at him, especially if they want to discourage this kind of behavior and these kinds of attacks. And as I mentioned earlier, it is remarkably easy to get the supplies together to create this acid that can just hurt and maim people that have, were just doing their job. These guys were just delivery men. They were riding around their motorcycles to deliver stuff. The court is going to sentence him in March. And please know that in March, I will be talking about this again. I hope these two men spend a long, long time in jail. It's just senseless violence and senseless pain. It's horrible to look at that this is what's happening now. There is no happy end to this story. The only happy ending is everyone survived. But that's it. I'll see you next time.